How's it going, guys? You good? Good. Today, guys, I'm going to be doing a Captain Marvel review. I'm going to be doing a spoiler-filled review. It might not have loads of spoilers, but it'll have enough to ruin the film for you if you haven't seen it. I'm going to be breaking down, giving you my opinions on it. Now, don't get me wrong, I liked the film. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again. It is re-watchable, as most Marvel films are. However, there were a few things that weren't quite right for my liking and that I would have personally liked to see a bit different. This review is mainly going to be critical, but come the end, I'll try and explain why I liked it, and I'll give you a rating out of 10. Either way, it's still worth a watch. One of the biggest downsides for me personally from the film, the action scenes. Now, obviously, the film was plot-driven and character-driven, and that's no bad thing. That's a good thing, in fact. But I can't help but feel they could have spent a little bit more time on the action sequences. They weren't very original. Now, obviously, it's difficult these days to get really original action sequences. But even so, having said that, it was a little bit lacking. None of them really give you that kind of like wow factor that you get, for example, when Thor, with his Stormbreaker, smashes into the ground. I cannot remember most of the sequences where the action happened. They were pretty unmemorable. That's not a massive problem. To be honest with you, a lot of the film isn't that memorable. It doesn't mean it's a bad film, as I said. I enjoyed it, I'd watch it again, and it is worth going to see. But that was one of my biggest gripes with it. Perhaps the biggest, pretty much the biggest problem I have with the film is they don't really show a journey for her learning to enhance her powers. Now, they show Jude Law's character constantly banging on to her about you need to control them. Now, basically, he's telling her not to use them that much. She can fly, but at no point do you see during the film her struggle to learn to fly. In Man of Steel, you see Superman struggle with his powers, learning to fly. It's a really good sequence in Man of Steel. I'm a Marvel fan mainly, but I did enjoy Man of Steel. That was a good film. And you see him struggle. I know Marvel said that this wasn't a traditional origin story, but because of that, I feel it was missing important parts which help you to feel like you know the character and like the character even more. Throughout the film, you just kind of take it on faith that she's got these powers, and presumably she's struggled with them behind the scenes. We don't see her struggle with them and learn to enhance them, and there's no real explanation other than it happened during an explosion and she gets these powers. There's no real, that I can remember anyway, that you see her realise she's got these powers and what she's supposed to do with them. There's no freaking out about it. And even in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daisy Johnson initially doesn't know how to use her quaking abilities. Ultimately, she can kind of fly, can Daisy Johnson. But she can't do that straight away. She has to figure that out for herself. But there's none of that with this. There's certain gaps in the film which you're just left to fill in yourself, which personally for me would be better if they left in there. Now, one of the plus sides of the film is the humour, and Nick Fury and his banter with Captain Marvel is very good. It adds to the film. Their relationship is probably the strongest point in the film, and Nick Fury in particular has a lot more light-hearted scenes than he has done probably in any of the MCU films combined up to now. One of the biggest plus sides for me of the film was the Skrull twist. Now, throughout all of the marketing, they're making it pretty clear in the trailers that the Skrulls are the bad guys. Now, in the comics, they are. You're expecting that to be the case in the film, but as we know, Marvel do change things for the films. They do switch things up, and they have done in this one particularly. They've made it clear, or Kevin Feige, or Feige, however you want to pronounce his name, has said that just like humans, not all Skrulls are bad, and they flipped it on its head. I wasn't expecting the Skrulls to be the ones that ultimately Carol Danvers helped out. A lot of people will complain about this because they think this completely ruins out the possibility of a secret invasion. But I don't think it does, because as not all Skrulls are bad, some are good, some are bad, you know, it still leaves potential there for something to get messed up in the future and some of the Skrulls to be resentful towards Earth. There's still possibilities there. You don't really find out why she's called Captain Marvel. While she's in the Air Force, I believe she's a captain, but we don't really know. At no point in the film does anyone call her Captain that I can remember. The Marvel bit, some people have theorised that she's gonna call herself Captain Marvel as a homage to her mentor, Mar-Vell, who we see in the film. Mar-Vell, who was working on the Pegasus project. Yeah, people have theorised that she's going to call herself Captain Marvel as a homage to both Captain America and Mar-Vell. Now, one of the best parts of the film was the addition of Goose, the cat. Or shall we say, Goose, the flurkin. But apart from being cute and also dangerous, because he's a flurkin, Goose could be a really important character. The Flurkin could be a really important character because for the future of the MCU, they can keep loads of stuff in them. They've got pocket universes inside them, I believe. They are quite important in the comics. That could be utilised for the future of the MCU. If a cat can keep a Tesseract down, that's a pretty useful ability. They're basically like feline TARDISes. One of the problems I did have, and this relates back to the action sequences, I know she's overpowered, I know Captain Marvel's overpowered. Apparently they tried to tone that down in a clever way in the film. I didn't see what that clever way was. But she destroys a spaceship towards the end of the film like a hot knife through butter. And for me, there was no building up to that. There was no her really having to harness her powers in order to work a frenzy and get into a state where she can do that. She just does it. Considering that was the denouement of the film, the end of the film, the climax, it was anticlimactic. Yeah, it was overpowered, a bit like Thor can be overpowered, but as I said before, it didn't leave you with much of a wow moment while you're watching it in the cinema. So that was a bit disappointing. Cutting through a spaceship like that all by yourself, that's very OP. By the end of the film, you're left feeling like the battles that they've had ultimately weren't that difficult because her powers are so strong. You never felt like she ever had to do anything that was a true sacrifice. She never had to really do anything that felt that brave, personally. It didn't feel like the stakes were that high. She was obviously upset about not knowing her past and finding out that she'd been lied to all this time. The film didn't make it feel like she had to do anything brave. It would have been better if they'd done more with her struggling to fight against her Kree friends. There should have been more of a conflict in her mind between, yes, she's been lied to, but these people that she's been working with, they still feel like friends to her and she's going to find it difficult to fight them. It would have been nice to see more of a conflict in that way, and I feel that would have been more realistic and more human, ultimately. As we find out towards the end of the film, we find out the reason why Fury loses his eye. For a lot of people, this is the worst point of the film, and I can understand why. He loses his eye to Goose, the flurkin, but because it's no ordinary cat, presumably it's a venomous scratch, and that leads to him losing his eye. More importantly than that, he doesn't seem that bothered. He obviously probably wouldn't know straight away that that was what was going to happen. Even by the end credits scene, he doesn't seem too bothered. Maybe he's come to terms with it by then. For a lot of people, that was a real disappointment, because in Captain America Winter Soldier, Fury says to Captain, "The last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye." And that makes it sound rather ominous, rather interesting. Ooh, who did he lose his eye to? What happened? And you find out it's just a cat. Now, we find out Nick Fury gets his pager upgraded from Captain Marvel at the end of the film. And she says to him, "Page me only in case of an emergency." The question is, why hasn't Fury paged her Avengers, the first one, Age of Ultron, or Infinity War? Now, some people have said, ooh, it's because he didn't think she was needed. Personally, I think that's a load of... I think he would have paged her. And I think it was Kevin Feige that said this, he said, how do we know he hasn't paged her? And this is very true. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean he hasn't tried paging her. And for whatever reason, she hasn't responded because she genuinely doesn't believe it's important enough. And I think that's the most likely and the most plausible scenario. He has probably tried paging her, but she's like, I can't be dealing with this. Presumably, she's decided to help him out, or help Fury out, this time because she's seen the effects of the snapping herself, the decimation. She's seen half of the people around her suddenly disappear. She knows something big is up. And so when she gets that call, at the same time she's seeing people around her disappear, presumably, she knows it's related. For me, I think one of the reasons this film didn't quite work, it was entertaining, but it didn't quite hit the spot, is it felt like it was probably a little bit rushed. Like they suddenly decided that they were desperate to get her into Endgame. And so there were missing points in the film, there were gaps that were left out that I think were important. And that would have added to the entertainment and to the value of the film and the value of the character ultimately. And it felt like they were so desperate to get her into Endgame that they didn't take as much time over her as I personally would have liked. If she's that important to the MCU and she's that powerful, I think they should have taken more time to build up her backstory. That's just my personal feelings on the matter. She's still a likeable character. You're still rooting for her, but I just feel it could have been done a bit better. To be fair to the film, I think, we've got to think of it in terms of a trilogy. I think it will get better as the films go on, just a bit like Thor, apart from Dark World. For the most part, Thor got better as a character as he went along. The first film was entertaining, second film, Dark World, arguably the worst film in the MCU. Thor Ragnarok, one of the best films in the MCU, right up there. Funny, entertaining, cool, epic. Yeah, Ragnarok was brilliant. And this film, is by no means the worst in the MCU. It's just, personally, considering your anticipation and your expectations for the film, it was a bit of a meh. But that's only because of Marvel's relative success. It's only because they've created so many great films and they've set the bar so high that I came out of the cinema feeling a little bit disappointed by it. In hindsight, and probably once you watch it a second time, you'll realise, actually, yeah, it was a pretty good film. The most important thing is, though, that you like the character by the end of the film. Even if you don't feel like you know her that much, despite having had the origin story, which I think that's the biggest problem in the film, that you still don't feel like you know her after you've come out of the cinema. You still like her, though, and that's important, especially moving forward. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. Out of 10, I would give the film, right now I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I know that sounds, for some of you that thinks that sounds harsh, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. In time, I think it's one of those films that you probably enjoy more watching a second and third time. But at the moment, a 6 out of 10. And that's only a 6 out of 10 because of expectations. I was going into the cinema expecting to come out thinking it was an 8 out of 10, for example. And that's what I was hoping for. And maybe I set my expectations a little bit too high, but that's what Marvel have made me do. That's it for now, guys. My next video, I'm going to be breaking down the second Endgame trailer. If you haven't already, then leave a like, subscribe if you liked the video, and hopefully I'll see you next time.